So we're going to turn our attention briefly to Andy Grove. Andy Grove sadly passed away just a few months ago. And Andy never wanted awards. And that's why we can finally give him a Visionary Award. And I say that, humbly and with honor, but this organization has never given nor thought about giving an award posthumously like this. But if there was anyone in the tech industry that exemplified vision, that allowed this industry to move forward without the processors, the technology, and the movement of that technology that, frankly, Intel made and led the industry on, we would not be where we are in anything that we do today, period, full stop. And Andy led that company, had a vision for that company, for the processors, and for the technology that very, very few people ever passing through technology have ever had. So we have 4 people who are going to have a short conversation with us tonight and share their experiences with Andy and pay tribute to this great technology leader. Rick is up first. He spent the last several years working with Andy, his foundation, and some other things. He has an awful lot to share in just a short few minutes. Please welcome to the stage Rick Bentley.
As Kevin mentioned, Andy was the kind of guy to avoid prestigious events like this. And even though I consider myself to be the typical Silicon Valley devout agnostic, I kind of fear the booming voice and lightning bolt right now as I speak about him. I knew Andy at a different phase of his life than I think most of us know of him. I met him in 2009, kind of after a lot of his fanfare was over. Andy had Parkinson's disease, and so did my dad. Andy and I hoped that with some money, some technology, some entrepreneurial spirit, we could do something for the betterment of people with the disease. Andy and my dad, interestingly enough, were from the same era, around the same age. Both were engineers with similar engineering type brains. And those brains were decaying on a similar disease progression timeline. In fact, they died within a few months of each other at the end. My dad was in Seattle. I didn't see him as much as I would have liked, but I saw Andy every day in Los Altos. And that was kind of a surrogate in some ways for seeing my dad. And working with Andy was a real opportunity, I think, for anybody, and it's one I really appreciated. I thought it would be how to become a great wielder of power and wealth, perhaps, or the other sort of things you think about when you work for someone like that. But really the lesson I got from Andy was how to wield such things gently. I can think of a lot of different lessons, things that happened to us throughout our work together. But I'll just pick one of the totally banal ones that ties into exactly the type of stereotype for a lesson you'd get from Andy. So he and I had a little disagreement over the importance of the Michael J. Fox Foundation in the Parkinson's space. And he had made an early commitment to them and wanted to see it through. And we were kind of looking for some other organizations to bring into the fold. And I had a project that we had put together, an objective measurement of Parkinson's disease, and we're looking forward to bringing a broader community for it. Andy had a different plan. And we had a big kickoff meeting set up, and just before that meeting, Andy had another call set up that he wanted us to have to just go over some of the things with a tighter group of people that we knew. So I walked into that call, and by the end of the call, the Fox Foundation had owned everything. And I'd been outmaneuvered, and I didn't even know I was on a battlefield, right? And this was Andy's foundation. I mean, he was the chairman, he funded it, right? He could have just said, do it that way because I said so, right? And that would have been the end of it. He had more power at his own foundation than he had at Intel, as an example. But instead, he really showed me how you can get things done that you need to get done without the top-down power dynamic, right? The subtle manipulation of events is better than the ungainly wield of power. Anyway, like all of us, I I was touched by Andy's technological contributions. I had an 8088 that I went to college with that I upgraded to an 8286 with this crazy ISA motherboard plug-in thing, and more computers followed. But Andy touched me personally more than his contribution has, and that says a lot because his contribution was overwhelming. He was more than Intel and chips. He was a very smart, dedicated, kind man who fought to the very end. He set a high bar for all of us in business, and he set at least a high bar in every other aspect of his life. And I was lucky to know him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Dr. Craig Taylor was one of Andy's very best friends for many decades. And we are very, very honored that he was able to join us tonight to share his thoughts. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Craig Taylor.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor, and thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words about Andy. Andy and I were very close friends for over 40 years, often walking together in the hills around Los Altos and discussing whatever, but never the Warriors, because he had very little interest in basketball. His contributions to the semiconductor industry are very well known, and I'm not going to go through those. I thought I would really focus on another side of his vision and genius, which is how he dealt with medical illnesses. Rick touched on this a little bit, but for me as a physician and a friend, how he thought about his own illness and how he turned it into contribution for others, I think is both visionary and inspiring. So in 1994, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, as some of you might know. Some patients will simply go to a doctor or give them a recommendation, but of course, Andy wanted to go to a whole bunch of doctors. So he went to a surgeon, and the surgeon said, cut it out. Goes to a radiation oncologist. The radiation oncologist says, do radiation. And then he says, but on what basis? So he began to really synthesize the literature using CompuServe, by the way, which probably people vaguely remember. And with Eva and a lot of other people, he began to look at the prognosis of various kinds of interventions. He discovered that a new kind of therapy was becoming available, the use of beads, which are actually put into the prostate where the cancer is, and began to be curious about whether combinations of therapy might actually confer the best benefit for him. So he created a series of graphs looking at prognosis, side effects, outcomes, and on the basis of this made a decision which at the time pretty much nobody did. First of all, he created a database in the prostate cancer world that nobody knew about and informed a whole bunch of people, including his decision to pursue the use of a combination of beads and the general radiation. And it worked well for him. He was cancer-free for the rest of his life. No, I think it's kind of incredible that someone takes that kind of charge of their illness and is not, and you've never seen him kowtowed by anyone but physicians. But what I think is really most impressive is he told his story in Fortune magazine, and I would encourage all of you to read his story, Taking on Prostate Cancer, because it's a real testament to how an individual can take charge of an aspect of their lives. And he wanted to get very public and let everyone know not to be afraid of this disease or others, but to think carefully about what you can do. And in fact, in doing so, he made recommendations that are very salient for everyone with medical illnesses, and I'm deeply appreciative to him for having done that. And then, unfortunately, in 2001, he learned he had Parkinson's disease. I was actually with him and made the diagnosis. But he approached this illness with the same sort of intelligence and conviction and dedication as many other aspects of his life. So at the time, Michael J. Fox had also been diagnosed with having Parkinson's disease, and he started the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So Andy created a foundation, the Kinetics Foundation, funded it, and worked very closely with Michael J. Fox in order to try to have a somewhat different approach to dealing with the knowledge of how you begin to treat and improve Parkinson's disease. One of the big innovations that he made was to encourage the Michael J. Fox Foundation to work with industry. Typically, foundations that are privately funded will tend to pay researchers really to work on either very basic science things or perhaps a few clinical things, but there's a big gap. And Andy became very obsessed about how you promote and increase translational science. In fact, another thing that people may not know about him is he started a master's program at Berkeley in order to promote translational science so things could go much more rapidly from the laboratory to the bedside. At any rate, this foundation, and when there was a note from one of the board of directors wrote that when Andy actually encouraged them to begin a different approach to philanthropy organization, plus, of course, on top of this was his incredible keen intelligence, dedication, focus, and vision. It changed the whole course of research with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they attribute much of what they have accomplished, which is substantial, to the kind of input that Andy gave them. So I think that there's another aspect of Andy in Parkinson's disease that relates actually to what Rick was saying. One of the things he was most proud about was developing objective measures. So when Andy looked around, there was no way to measure the status of a patient's movement disorder. So Andy thought, well, I'll invent one. So he got a little container with some marbles, and he had another container, and he would take the marbles, and he'd move one marble and put it in another container. And of course, he kept absolutely impeccable time about how long it took him to do it. And through that, he was able to get a sense of how his disease was progressing, which fortunately in the beginning was actually fairly slowly. And from that, he became interested in the development of objective measurement devices, which Rick has been involved with and is now used in clinical trials and available in a very important contribution by itself to Parkinson's disease. I could go on and talk about many of his other contributions, but I'm mindful of the time, so I think I'm going to stop there. But I want to say that Andy may not have changed the course of his own disease, but he set the foundation for work that will change the course of many thousands of other people. Thanks, Andy, for your courage, your vision, your generosity, and your friendship.
Craig Barrett was CEO and chairman of Intel for many years and, of course, worked with Andy directly for a very long time. He was so kind when I contacted him to rearrange his travel to specifically be here with us tonight. Andy meant a lot and enough to change the course of his history this week to be here with us. Craig was also a 2004 visionary and with us. So please welcome to the stage. We're so honored to have Craig Barrett.
It's rather unique to talk about Andy. I don't think I ever spent 4 minutes with him where he didn't correct me 6 times. It's maybe the only 4 minutes, Andy, that I get on my own. I mean, I think Andy's achievements, his vision, and his results orientation in the high-tech industry speak for themselves. And if you look at his history, I think his history was primarily one of having a vision and then being able to deliver the results to make that vision into reality. And he was really a results-oriented, kick-ass type of guy, as you gentlemen have observed in his later career in the medical industry, bringing database decision-making, which certainly in prostate cancer was not there before he had his experience. But you know, some of the results that I was able to work with Andy on, watching what he did in the footsteps of Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore at Intel and making that the #1 semiconductor company in the world and it's been the #1 company in the world for 25 years. He was able to develop an immensely talented group of subordinates, who not only just at Intel, but people that went off and ran other companies. He was able to develop the Intel Inside brand, a commodity brand, which was unparalleled in the world and still one of the most valuable brands in the world. And he was able to work with others in the industry to, in fact, create the industry, create the computer revolution, and then the internet industry that went beyond that. And Tom, by the way, I'm one of those poor souls who has a ranch in Montana with no cell service, crappy satellite, downlink. I'd like a little bit of your work to follow there. But in terms of Andy's going for results, one of the things I most enjoyed about him and most respected him for was his ability to build bridges for other people to succeed. And whether it was just through his mentoring of people like myself and many, many others, whether it was teaching at Stanford in the business school, whether it was the books that he wrote, whether it was his Dear Abby column of here's how to handle yourself in the workplace and deal with complicated problems, he built bridges. And those bridges allowed thousands of people to be successful and to grow in capability. So I thought, in an unusual tribute here in Silicon Valley to someone, I'd finish off by reading a poem, which I want to dedicate to Andy. You know, it's no PowerPoint, it's hard copy, ageless. The poem is called The Bridge Builder. It's by Will Allen Dromgoole, a poet from Tennessee, born in, I believe, 1860. Don't be fooled by the name Will Allen. It's a female. She wanted to be a lawyer like her father. Turns out you couldn't be a lawyer in Tennessee in the late 19th century, so she became a poet and a writer. So let me just read this poem, and this is my feelings about Andy, what he did, what he's accomplished, and how he dedicated his life. So, Bridge Builder, Will Allen Dromgoole. An old man going a lone highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fear for him, but he turned when safe on the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. Old man, said a fellow pilgrim near, you are wasting your strength with building here. Your journey will end with the ending day. You never again will pass this way. You've crossed this chasm deep and wide. Why build this bridge at evening tide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there followed after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been naught to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I am building this bridge for him. I greatly appreciate all the bridges that Andy built for me. And I know that he built bridges for thousands and thousands of other people. That's how I want to remember the man. It wasn't for him, it was for everybody else, building bridges, bridges of opportunity. Thank you.
One of the things that always just most impressed me about Andy was how he could look at and find talent in the organization. And one time when I was just a young engineer and I was in charge of taping out the 386, I had to give a presentation to the executive staff of Intel. It was Andy and Gordon and Bob Noyce, the gods of the semiconductor industry. And in this meeting, I was sort of chewing them out because the computers weren't stable and I couldn't get my chip out the door. A couple of days later, I'm working in my office, didn't want to be interrupted. The phone rings, and I pick it up, and I say, who is it? Andy. Andy who? And it comes back, Andy Grove. I'm panicked, right? And he starts asking me questions. What do you read? What are you studying? What are your career objectives? And I was barely able to form a sentence, much less a good answer. lousy answers. Be in my office in a week with better ones. The president says to be in his office in a week, what do? You either leave the country or you show up. And that began a mentoring relationship that lasted over 30 years. Another thing about Andy was how he bet on and helped create and mature talent. I was about ready. I had resigned from Intel. I was going to go to Stanford and finish my PhD. And Andy comes to me and he says, do you want to go there and learn in the simulator? Or do you want to stay here and fly the jet? And he made me the 486 design manager. I was 25 years old. He bet on me to lead maybe the most important chip in the entire industry at the time. I was 25 years old. There was nobody on the team that was younger than me, and I was in charge. And he just mentored me and challenged me and gave me an extraordinary opportunity that just vaulted my career at Intel. And for that, I'm deeply indebted to this man. And Andy was a tough mentor. If you were 95% right with Andy, you were wrong, because he was just going to challenge you and force you to think through everything. His intellectual integrity was so aggressive and thorough. You know, I often described it that mentoring with Andy Grove was like going to the dentist without Novocaine. He was tough, he was hard, he was demanding, but he was going to make you the very best person that you could be. One time we left a meeting with Bill Gates and Andy Grove and a few of us, and I remember commenting as we left the meeting how tough but calm Andy was, right? And this was like, two, mountain goats butting heads with each other, these two industry titans. And Andy just sort of made this offhanded comment. He says, he wasn't that tough. He's not a dictator. And years later, after I read his autobiography titled Swimming Across, and just, how Andy had left, the Nazi Hitler Germany, right, and had swam across to the United States, that literally he had seen everything. He had truly seen the face of dictators and industry leaders like Gates, and just the integrity of the man, the resolve and his clarity of going forward. What huge respect, we all, and I personally, could have for that kind of man. It was a sad day when I heard about Andy's parting. It was a day that I lost a mentor, a friend, and a hero. And for that, and I and so many others, just say thank you, Andy.